The gun pointed at my head wasn't part of the plan. Neither was the smile on my former best friend's face as his finger hovered over the trigger. "Sorry, Jack," whispered Ryan, the cold metal pressing against my temple. "Nothing personal, just business." In that moment, with rain pouring down and my heart hammering in my chest, I realized how completely blind I'd been. The betrayal 10 years ago was just the beginning. Now, staring death in the face, I understood that some stories don't end when you think they do. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Jack. 10 years ago, my world fell apart when the two people I trusted most betrayed me in the worst possible way. My best friend Ryan and my fiancée Sarah took everything from me, or at least that's what I thought at the time. Ryan wasn't just my friend. He was my brother in all but blood. We grew up together, shared secrets under blanket forts, planned our futures over late-night pizza, and promised to always have each other's backs. The kind of friend who knew all my passwords and could finish my sentences. I trusted him with everything. Sarah was the love of my life. She had this way of laughing that made her nose scrunch up. She always smelled like vanilla and sunshine. When she looked at me with those bright green eyes, I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. I was going to marry her. We had our whole lives planned out, the house with the blue door, 2 kids, maybe a dog. It was all so clear in my mind. Then came that rainy Tuesday evening when Sarah sat me down at our kitchen table. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't look me in the eye. My stomach felt funny, like I was on a roller coaster going down the steepest drop. "Jack," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. That's when I knew something was really wrong. "It's Ryan," she said, her voice cracking. I think I love him." At first, I couldn't understand what she was saying. The words jumbled in my brain like pieces from different puzzles. Ryan, my best friend since we were 7 years old? That couldn't be right. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice sounding strange and far away. "We didn't mean for it to happen," Sarah continued, tears streaming down her face. "It just did. I'm so sorry, Jack." The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. This couldn't be happening. But the pain in Sarah's eyes told me it was real. My fiancé and my best friend had fallen in love behind my back. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 3 months, she admitted. 3 months. While I was planning our wedding, while Ryan was helping me pick out rings, while we were all having dinner together and laughing, they were sneaking around behind my back that I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. I wanted to find Ryan and demand an explanation. But I just sat there, feeling like someone had scooped out my insides and left me hollow. Sarah kept talking, kept crying, kept saying they didn't mean to hurt me. But her words just washed over me like I was underwater. That I got up without saying anything else. I grabbed my keys and left. Sarah called after me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't look at her face anymore. That I expected Ryan to call, to try to explain, to apologize. But he never did. The silence hurt more than any words could have. My best friend didn't even think I deserved an explanation. That night, I drove around for hours, rain pounding on my car, matching the storm inside me. When I finally went home, Sarah had moved her things out. Just like that, my future was gone. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept expecting to wake up and find out it was all a bad dream. But each morning, the emptiness in my apartment reminded me it was real. That I threw myself into work. If I couldn't have love, I would have success. I stayed late at the office, took on extra projects, and pushed myself harder than ever before. My boss noticed and gave me more responsibilities. While my heart was breaking, my career was taking off. There was a small voice in my head that whispered, "Show them what they missed out on." It wasn't the healthiest motivation, but it got me out of bed each morning. I heard through mutual friends that Ryan and Sarah got married in a fancy beach ceremony. I blocked them on social media. I changed my phone number. I did everything I could to erase them from my life. Years passed. The pain didn't go away completely, but it dulled. I built my own company from scratch, pouring all my energy into creating something meaningful. I worked weekends, holidays, birthdays. My company grew from just me in a tiny office to dozens of employees in a sleek downtown building. But success didn't fill the empty spaces in my life. I had money, respect, and achievement, but I came home to an empty apartment each night. I told myself I was too busy for relationships, but the truth was, I was scared. Scared of trusting someone again. Scared of being hurt. Then I met Emma. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever known. She was brilliant, kind, and completely unimpressed by my success. She ran her own tech company that was twice the size of mine. On our first date, she called me out for checking my phone during dinner. "If you'd rather be working, we can do this another time," she said firmly. I put my phone away and really looked at her. Her warm brown eyes didn't let me hide. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Dating Emma wasn't easy. We were both workaholics with trust issues. We argued about silly things. We both tried to control everything. But there was something real between us that kept pulling us back together. Slowly, Emma helped me remember who I was before the betrayal. She made me laugh again. She encouraged me to reconnect with old friends. She taught me that vulnerability wasn't weakness. After 2 years of dating, we got married in a small ceremony with just our closest friends. No fancy beach wedding, just real promises between two people who chose each other every day. Life with Emma was good, better than good. We built a home together. We merged our companies to create something bigger than either of us could have done alone. We didn't have it all figured out, but we faced each challenge as a team. I thought about Ryan and Sarah less and less as the years went by. They became characters in an old story, not people who still had power over me. Then came the invitation. It arrived on a normal Tuesday morning. My assistant handed me a thick cream envelope with my name written in gold letters. "It's from the Business Leaders Summit," she said excitedly. "They only invite the top entrepreneurs in the country." I opened it with pride. The Business Leaders Summit was the most exclusive business event of the year. Being invited meant I had truly made it to the top. I scanned the details. A 5-day retreat at a luxury mountain resort, networking with the most successful CEOs in the country, workshops led by industry legends. It was an incredible opportunity. "You should definitely go," Emma said when I showed her the invitation that evening. "Think of the connections you could make." I nodded, already imagining the possibilities. This summit could take our company to even greater heights. What I didn't know then was that this summit would also bring my past crashing back into my present. The resort was even more impressive than the pictures. Nestled between snow-capped mountains, it looked like something from a fairy tale. My room had floor-to-ceiling windows with views that took my breath away. The first evening was a welcome reception. I put on my best suit and headed to the grand ballroom, ready to mingle with fellow business leaders. The room was filled with people in expensive clothes, all talking animatedly about market trends and investment opportunities. I recognized several famous faces from magazine covers and TV interviews. I was deep in conversation with a venture capitalist when I heard a voice behind me that made my blood freeze. "Jack, is that you?" I turned slowly, my heart pounding against my ribs. And there they were, Ryan and Sarah. 10 years older but unmistakable. Ryan still had that easy smile, though there were now lines around his eyes. Sarah's hair was shorter, styled in an elegant bob. They both looked surprised to see me, like I was a ghost from their past. "Ryan, Sarah?" I said, keeping my voice steady even though my insides were churning. Ryan recovered first, his surprise morphing into a smug smile. "Wow, I didn't expect to see you here." I shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Life takes unexpected turns." Sarah said nothing, her eyes darting between Ryan and me. The air between us felt heavy with unspoken history. "Well, we should catch up sometime this week," Ryan said, extending his hand. His confidence grated on my nerves. Did he really think we could just make small talk after everything? I shook his hand briefly, nodding without committing to anything. As they walked away, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself that I hadn't expected them to still affect me this way. Seeing them brought back memories I thought I'd buried years ago. The betrayal felt fresh again. An old wound reopened. I tried to focus on the networking event, but my mind kept drifting to Ryan and Sarah. What were they doing here? How successful had Ryan become? Were they happy together? I hated that I still cared enough to wonder. The next morning at breakfast, Ryan approached me again. He slid into the seat across from me without asking permission. "So, tell me about yourself," he said, buttering a piece of toast. "I hear you've done well." I looked at him, trying to figure out his angle. Was he genuinely interested, or just fishing for information? I replied simply. "And you?" "Oh, he said with a wave of his hand. "Living the dream. Sarah and I have that big house in the suburbs now. We travel a lot, Europe, Asia, you name it. Corporate life has been good to me." Every word felt like a boast, like he was trying to prove he'd made the right choice in betraying me. "Sounds nice," I said, keeping my expression neutral. "It is," he nodded, leaning back in his chair. "You should see Sarah these days. She's involved in all these charity events. We're living exactly the kind of life we always talked about back in college. Remember those conversations?" I did remember. They were my dreams too, once, before they were stolen from me. "I remember," I said quietly. Ryan kept talking, dropping names of important people he knew, places he'd been, things he owned. With each word, I realized something. He was trying too hard. People who are truly content don't need to convince others of their happiness. Later that day, I ran into Sarah alone. She was standing by the coffee station, stirring cream into her cup. When she saw me, she froze for a second before forcing a smile. "Hello, Jack," she said softly. "Hello, Sarah. You look good," she said after a moment. "Successful." "Thank you. So do you." There was an awkward silence. So many things I could have said swirled in my mind, but none of them seemed right. "I'm glad you're doing well, Jack," she finally said. "Truly." I nodded, studying her face. The Sarah I remembered had always been full of laughter and light. This woman looked polished but tired. There was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a kind of sadness or resignation. "I hope you are too," I replied. She nodded quickly, but something in her expression made me doubt it. Before I could think more about it, she hurried away, leaving me wondering what was really going on in her perfect-sounding life. Throughout the summit, I kept noticing little things that didn't match Ryan's grand stories. The way Sarah tensed when he put his arm around her. The hushed arguments they thought no one could hear. The worried look on Sarah's face when Ryan was talking to investors one afternoon. I overheard Sarah talking to another woman while I was around the corner. "It's not what I thought it would be," Sarah was saying, her voice low. "Ryan's company is struggling. The debts keep piling up, but he won't admit it. He keeps spending like nothing's wrong. Have you tried talking to him?" The other woman asked. "Countless times. He doesn't listen. He's too proud to admit he's failing." I walked away quietly, not wanting to eavesdrop further. But their perfect life was starting to look like a carefully constructed facade. On the fourth day of the summit, I was asked to give a speech about resilience in business. I hadn't planned to talk about personal experiences, but standing on that stage, looking out at all those faces, including Ryan and Sarah, something shifted inside me. "True success isn't about appearances," I said into the microphone. "It's about building something real, something that lasts even when everything falls apart." 10 years ago, I lost everything I thought mattered. My fiancée, my best friend, my plans for the future, all gone overnight. I saw Ryan shift uncomfortably in his seat. Sarah was staring at her hands. "That betrayal could have destroyed me," I continued. "But instead, it forced me to rebuild myself from the ground up, to figure out who I really was without those relationships defining me. The company I've built isn't just a business. It's proof that sometimes losing everything is actually the beginning of something better." The audience applauded when I finished. Several people came up afterward to share their own stories of overcoming obstacles. But I was most aware of Ryan and Sarah, who stayed in their seats, not meeting each other's eyes. That evening, there was a formal dinner to close the summit. I was sitting with Emma, enjoying the meal, when Ryan approached our table. He looked different, The confident smile was gone, replaced by something more genuine and vulnerable. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Privately?" I glanced at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. I followed Ryan out to the terrace, where the cool night air provided a welcome break from the stuffy ballroom. For a long moment, Ryan just stood there, looking out at the mountains. Then he turned to me, his expression serious. "I heard your speech today," he said. "It made me realize something I've been avoiding for years." I waited, not making it easier for him. "I'm not happy, Jack," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "None of it turned out the way I thought it would." "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly older and very tired. "The perfect life I've been bragging about? It's all smoke and mirrors. My company is failing. We're drowning in debt. Sarah and I." He trailed off, shaking his head. "We haven't been happy for years." I felt a strange mix of emotions: surprise, vindication, and unexpectedly, pity. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I owe you the truth," he said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. 10 years ago, I thought I was taking the better path by choosing Sarah. I convinced myself we deserved to be happy, even if it meant hurting you. But now I see that happiness built on betrayal was never going to last. I let his words sink in. For years, I'd imagined confronting Ryan, making him admit he was wrong. But now that it was happening, it didn't feel as satisfying as I'd expected. "I'm sorry, Jack," Ryan said, his voice breaking slightly. "For everything. I know it's too late to matter, but I truly am sorry." Before I could respond, Sarah appeared at the terrace doorway. She looked between us, understanding dawning on her face. "I should go," Ryan said, straightening his shoulders. "Thank you for listening." As he walked away, Sarah approached me hesitantly. "Did he tell you?" she asked. I nodded. She sighed, wrapping her arms around herself against the chilly evening air. "We're getting divorced," she said quietly. "It's been a long time coming." "I'm sorry," I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. Sarah gave me a sad smile. "The irony is we destroyed something real for something that wasn't. You deserved better, Jack." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the past and the present between us. "Your wife seems wonderful," Sarah said finally. "You found your happiness after all." "I did," I agreed, thinking of Emma waiting inside. "But not the way I expected to." Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's the thing about life, isn't it? It never goes according to plan." As she turned to leave, she paused. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I am truly sorry, Jack, for all of it." I watched her walk away, feeling a strange sense of closure. The anger and resentment I'd carried for so long seemed lighter somehow, less important. When I returned to Emma, she took one look at my face and knew something significant had happened. "Are you okay?" she asked, taking my hand. I thought about it for a moment. "Yeah," I said, squeezing her hand. "I really am." On our last morning at the resort, as Emma and I were checking out, I caught sight of Ryan in the lobby. He was alone, looking out the window at the mountains. On impulse, I walked over to him. "Ryan," I said. He turned, surprise and wariness on his face. "Jack," I just wanted to say, I began, choosing my words carefully, "that I hope you find your way forward." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I hope so too." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something close to peace. As Emma and I drove away from the resort, I felt lighter than I had in years. "You know," Emma said as we wound down the mountain roads, "sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's moving on and finding happiness anyway." I smiled, taking her hand. "It's not even revenge at that point. It's just living well." The betrayal that once defined me had become just a chapter in my story, not the whole book. Ryan and Sarah had their own journeys now, their own consequences to face. And I had mine, a life built on resilience, truth, and love. As we reached the bottom of the mountain, a text message came through on my phone. It was from an unknown number, but I knew immediately who it was from. Thank you for showing me what real success looks like. Ryan, I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That chapter was finally closed. But life has a way of adding unexpected twists just when you think the story is over. 6 months after the summit, I received another text from Ryan. Need to talk.
Urgent.
Please call. Against my better judgment, I called. Ryan sounded desperate. He said he had uncovered something big at his old company, evidence of massive fraud that reached to the highest levels. People who would do anything to keep it hidden. They're after me, Jack, he said, his voice shaking. I don't know who else to turn to. I agreed to meet him that night at an old warehouse by the river. Emma thought I was crazy to go. After everything he did to you? She asked incredulously. I know, I said, struggling to explain. But if he's telling the truth, he's in real danger. The warehouse was dark when I arrived, rain pouring down around me. I called Ryan's name, my voice echoing in the empty space. And that's how I ended up here, with Ryan pointing a gun at my head, that familiar smile now twisted with desperation. Sorry, Jack, he whispers. Nothing personal, just business. What are you doing, Ryan? I ask, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. They offered me a way out, he says, his hand trembling slightly. Turn you over and my debts disappear. Your company has something they want. And you believe them? I ask, stalling for time. The same people who are supposedly after you? Doubt flickers across his face. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice, I say. The same choice you had 10 years ago. You can betray me again, or you can do the right thing. Rain pounds on the metal roof above us. Ryan's finger tenses on the trigger. Then, a voice cuts through the darkness. Federal agents. Drop your weapon. The warehouse suddenly floods with light. FBI agents stream in from all directions. Ryan's face crumples in shock as he lowers the gun as the agents handcuff Ryan. Emma rushes to my side, pulling me into a tight hug. How? I ask, still dazed. I followed you, she admits, and I called the FBI. I knew about the fraud investigation. It's been in the financial news. I connected the dots. Later, I learned the full story. Ryan hadn't uncovered fraud, he'd been part of it. When the scheme started to unravel, the ringleaders needed a scapegoat. They'd set Ryan up to take the fall, then offered him a deal. Deliver me and the proprietary technology my company had developed, and they'd help him disappear. In the end, Ryan's second betrayal led to his downfall. He confessed everything, hoping for leniency. Sarah, who truly hadn't known about the fraud, filed for divorce immediately. As for me, the attempted corporate espionage brought unexpected attention to my company. New investors came forward. Our technology, which helped detect financial fraud, was suddenly in high demand. A year later, Emma and I stood in our new home, watching the sunset from our back porch. Our company had tripled in size. We were expecting our first child. Do you ever think about how differently things could have turned out? Emma asked, her hand on her growing belly. I thought about Ryan, now serving time in a federal prison. About Sarah, who had moved across the country for a fresh start. About the young man I used to be, heartbroken and betrayed. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I look at what we've built together and I wouldn't change a thing. Every step of the journey led me here, to you. Emma smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. Even the bad parts? Especially the bad parts, I said. They showed me who I really am. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, I felt grateful for every part of my story. The betrayals and the triumphs, the heartbreaks and the healing. Without Ryan and Sarah's betrayal, I might never have become the man I needed to be to find Emma, to build this life. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best thing that ever happened to you. You just have to keep moving forward, one step at a time, until you find your way home.